So with chapter 13 of Nehemiah today, we're going to talk about what happens after they've put all this in place. So we spent the last few chapters talking about the great partying, the celebrations, the feasts that they've kept, the rituals that they've done, the covenants they've made. They are prepared and ready to follow the God's commandments that they're given, follow the law of Moses, put everything in place. Chapter 13, we're going to read what happens after they've put it in place. It's a good lesson for us, in fact, on leadership, of inspecting what you expect as well. Really some good things here. So verse 1, on that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonites and the Moabites should not come into the congregation of God forever. Remember, Ammonites and Moabites are far distant relatives through Abraham of Israelites. They're far distant, separated cousins. More really from Lot than Abraham, but Abraham and Lot were relatives as well. So they're not allowed to do the worship and do those things, basically, and they're kind of cursed. And part of that goes back to how they greeted Israel back when Israel had no home. And that's what they talk about in verse 2. Because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them. Howbeit our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now, if you go to Numbers, I believe it's chapter 22 and 23. If you go back into Numbers, you remember this story that the Ammonites and the Moabites did not want to treat Israel well. They hated Israel. They didn't want Israel around. But they knew Israel was a force to be reckoned with because they had wiped out several other people at that time. So Balaam was a prophet of God, or a very spiritual person, someone who was connected with God at the time. He could understand the Spirit. They hired him, if you remember, to basically go to the battlefield and curse Israel, so Israel would be punished by God. And if you remember, Balaam said, I can't curse Israel. God won't let me. But if Israel, he tried to teach the Ammonites and the Moabites a loophole in God's word, saying that, but I can't curse them directly, but if they're disobedient, they lose the blessings of God. And so they said, oh, we're going to do this. So they tempted them. Remember, they sent their women down to tempt the men into promiscuity, to violating the law of chastity and things, to bring the spiritual acuity of the Israel down, thus they would lose the blessings of God. And Balaam and they gotten cursed and got in a lot of trouble, and God helped Israel out because of the sneaky, underhanded way that Moabites, the Ammonites, were going about trying to get rid of Israel. So that's what they talk about in verse 2 there. In verse 3, now it came to pass when they had heard the law that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. So those are the other people who aren't Israelites. Verse 4, and before this, Eliashib the priest, having the oversight of the chamber of the house of our God, was allied unto Tobiah. And he had prepared for him a great chamber, where aforetime they laid the meat offerings, the frankincense in the vessels, and the tithes of the corn, and the new wine, and the oil, which was commanded to be given to the Levites, and the singers, and the porters, and the offerings of the priests. So this is putting everything together for where we're going to store the goods that come in for the Levites and priests, and how that works. Verse 6, but in all this time was not I at Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes king of Babylon came I unto the king. After certain days obtained I leave of the king. Now, if you remember, you got to go back to the chapter 1 of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is a servant. He was the cupbearer for Artaxerxes the first, who's Xerxes' son in Persia, basically. And it was his job to make sure the king wasn't poisoned. It's a very trusted job. So whoever was in that position, the king trusted a lot. That was Nehemiah. And as we can see of how he treated Israel, that was a big deal. Because you realize Nehemiah is like in the king's inner court. He knows what's going on. He is well paid, well taken care of in the king's court in Persia. But yet he asked to leave all of that so that he could go to Jerusalem and help the people out. So he walked away from his posh job, walked away from wealth and everything else, went to Jerusalem and got down with everybody else and built the walls again, reestablished Jerusalem, and fought out the corruption and promoted when Ezra was teaching the people, promoted that out there, became the governor of the land, and was really trying to oversee these projects to help rebuild the city and get the people righteous again. He left all that, so now he had to go back to report to Artaxerxes. And so he was gone for a while, and then he comes back to Jerusalem. It says, verse 7, and I came to Jerusalem and understood of the evil that Eliashib did for Tobiah in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. And it grieved me sore. Therefore I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. And then I commanded that they cleansed the chambers, and thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God with the meat offering and the frankincense. So this is the problem is Eliashib was supposed to provide a space for Tobiah, and it didn't quite work out. So they kicked all the stuff out. They moved Tobiah's stuff out, and they basically rededicated that area for the priests, and were able to get that back up to par where it's supposed to be. So there's some laziness in the leadership. They're not inspecting what they expect, and Nehemiah comes back and decides to check on things and finds out that it's not the way it should be. They've gone lazy on him, basically. Verse 10, and I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them. For the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled every one to his field. Now this is why the Levites were paid by the people. When the people brought sacrifices in, the Levites kept some of it for their own function so that they could focus their time on being priests. The problem is the people aren't paying them. They're not bringing their share in. They're not paying the tithing to the temple. They're not doing that. So what do the Levites do? They go out and they get land, and they start growing land. They start growing food and raising animals because they have to do something to survive for their families. But that means they're not spending time helping the people worship God and do the ordinances and things. So it's kind of a downward spiral of losing their religion, basically, is what's going on. And Nehemiah is like, this can't happen. We need to provide this. There is food. It's not getting to the Levites. There's probably somebody who's hoarding the food. Sometimes it happens when you have like a middle manager that likes to keep those resources together and won't let things through because it feels like he gives them power over others. Maybe that's what's going on. We don't know for sure. Could be they just got lazy and inept and weren't thinking about it. Could be a middle manager in there that was hoarding stuff for himself, wasn't giving it out. There's a lot of opportunities for what could have been, but it wasn't happening. So Nehemiah is changing that, basically. So verse 11, then contended I with the rulers and said, why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. So this is a good sign of a leader. He brings people together that are supposed to be the leaders going, why are you not doing your job? Let's get this going back on track. And he set them straight. He got them working, got them going so that it was moving forward. So Nehemiah is a great example of leadership. Verse 12, then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and the oil unto the treasuries. And I made the treasurers over the treasuries, Shamaliah, the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedaiah, and next to them was Hanan, son of Zachor, son of Mattaniah, for they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto their brethren. So he put people in place that he knew were going to do the job and get it worked out, basically. The other groups had become wicked and then lazy in their jobs. They'd found a spot, they'd worked their way up in their position to where they got to a spot where they were comfortable, and then they just stayed there and just let everything else fall apart, basically. We see this in corporations all the time with leadership. Nehemiah comes in and says, no more, we're not doing this. You guys are all out. We're bringing new people in who can actually do the work, who actually make sure things get done. Verse 14, remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for the offices thereof. This is Nehemiah begging for forgiveness. Forgive these people, a bunch of lazy jerks. We got them out. Please do not ruin what we've done. Meaning, don't let some other invading army come in and wipe out this wall we've built and push us all back to the Stone Age again, because these people are lazy jerks, basically. At least I'd say that would be my interpretation of what he's saying here. Verse 15, in those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. So this is the challenge that he has, as he realizes that commerce has become more important than Sabbath worship. And so Nehemiah is like, nope, we're done. We're going to change these things around to encourage the Sabbath to stay holy and not be just another day to get work done so that we can make more money or do more things for ourselves. That's verse 17. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah and said unto them, what evil thing is this that ye do and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So he's reinstituting this, and he's going back to those leaders who should be enforcing the laws and saying, why are you encouraging this behavior? Why are you not stopping them? What's going on? Let's get this fixed. Verse 19, and it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So he is putting laws in place to change the behaviors of the people to preserve Sabbath day worship. Verse 20, so the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. So they couldn't get in to sell their stuff, basically. Jerusalem's shut. We're shut down on the Sabbath. Verse 21, then I testified against them and said unto them, why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. So he even went up to the wall in Jerusalem and said, why are you guys out here? This is Sunday. Go away. If you don't go away, I'm going to deal with you. Basically. Verse 22, and I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, that they should come and keep the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy. So he's improving Sabbath day worship. He's trying to get Israel back. They've gone lazy in his absence. So the great manager leaves. The other managers who don't know what they're doing rise up to their own level of incompetence and remain there, and everything falls apart because no one is watching. They're getting lazy in what they do. This is almost that part of the pride cycle, so he's bringing them back before they get destroyed, basically, is what Nehemiah is doing here. Now, verse 23, in those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab. So these are Jews intermarrying with other tribes, other tribal groups in the area that they should not be intermarrying with. Verse 24, and their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. So they're losing their culture, their heritage, they're losing their religion by going with these other groups. Let's see, verse 25, and I contended with them and cursed them and smote certain of them and plucked off their hair and made them swear by God, saying, ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons for yourselves. So they were punished for violating the commandments. They were reprimanded, and they were very literally told, don't do this ever again, basically, based on the laws of Moses they had at the time. Verse 26, did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him did outlandish women cause to sin. So he says, basically, Solomon was a great king. He was highly revered of God, but he wasn't perfect. He still committed sin. Let's not go the way that he did. Verse 27, shall we then hearken unto you to do all this great evil, to transgress against our God in marrying strange wives? And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite. Therefore, I chased him from me. So this is somebody that got Nehemiah pissed. And tried to chase him out of the area, basically. Verse 29, remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. Thus I cleansed them from all strangers and appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, every one in his business, and for the wood offering at times appointed, and for the firstfruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. So now in actually the book, in the Bible dictionary, that the LDS Church has, this is something they said about this conflict that Nehemiah is dealing with here at the end of this chapter. After the return from the Babylonian captivity, Gerizim again became a place of importance as the center of the Samaritan worship. So Gerizim is a mountain. It's kind of the hill in the area, basically. A certain Manasseh, son or grandson of Joiada, a priest in Jerusalem, had married the daughter of Sanballat the Horonite. Refusing to put her away, he was expelled from the priesthood, and took refuge with the Samaritans, among whom, as a member of the high priestly family, he set up upon Mount Gerizim a rival temple and priesthood. So the Jews revered Jerusalem as the religious center. The Samaritans said Mount Gerizim is the religious center. So this priest, who was part of the tribe, intermarried, and then when he was told, you can't do that, that's a violation of our laws, you need to divorce your wife, he said, no, I won't divorce my wife. So he was kicked out of the priesthood, basically, and so he went and started his own competing temple. He created his own religion, a mock of the true religion, basically, made his own, so that he could still be priest and do what he wanted to do, but not have to follow the laws of Jerusalem, basically. So that's the challenges that are happening at this time, basically, that Nehemiah is cleaning up on this. So let's jump to the next chapter, which is not Nehemiah, but the chapter named after one of the few women that have a strong presence in the Bible, Esther. So we're going to get into her story next. We'll see you there.